Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Corey Lanphier and PK Dumont. My name is Kesley Price, and I am the Product Marketing Manager here at Technical Toolboxes, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. We'll get started here shortly, but first, if you have any questions or on what our presenters are covering, there's a chat box on the right-hand side of your webinar interface. Please send us any questions you may have throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to cover all the questions we receive at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll turn it over to Corey and we'll get started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kesley. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Corey Lanphier. I'm delighted to be here and to share my insight and experience into API 653 tank inspections. Now, before I dive into the heart of our discussion, I would like to take a minute to share a little bit about myself and my journey through the industry. I've been in this industry for the better part of 24 years. I'm 37 and I live in Maine. I started off getting involved in the industry with my grandfather at a very young age, and he owned a small engineering company that specialized in mechanical integrity when I was just a kid. So beginning there, I really developed into a full-time technician and report writer with him. Eventually, I decided that I wanted to make this a full-time career, and when I did, I asked him to help me try to get into the business, and his response to me at the time was he wanted me to get my hands dirty and to really experience the insides and outsides of this industry. So he insisted I go to work for a small tank construction company that was local here in Maine. After working for them for a little while, I got my hands dirty and definitely gained a lot of value out of working for this fabrication company. I eventually went to work for a large NDT company where I became a level 2 technician and eventually an API 653 inspector. After there, I moved on to another large NDT company where I became a full-time API inspector and lead inspector and started to really get into project management. After this, I went on to work for another small engineering company and became a regional manager. And that leads me to today, where I am now starting off my own business for mechanical integrity solutions called Lanphier Solutions. So wish me luck. So let's get started. For our agenda today, we're going to go over the fundamentals of API 653 inspections, the basics. Next, we're going to talk about mechanical integrity and precision, really some tips and tools to help you get better at your inspections. We'll talk about data management and how Technical Toolbox actually helps with collecting data, managing your data, performing reports, etc. Next, we'll talk about the challenges you may face, some of my own challenges I've faced along the way, and some case studies. And I'll give you some tips and tools on how to combat those challenges. Next, we'll talk about the new Technical Toolbox, new data collection tool. And then we'll do a live Q&A where you guys can ask as many questions as you want, either about the program, my experience, so on and so forth. So let's start with the fundamentals, intro to tank inspections, the basics. I like to break this down into 4 sections for task management purposes. Planning ahead, which is pre-job preparation, scope development, planning your procedures, project execution, which is the field work, and then submittals, which could be reporting, giving your recommendations, etc. Now, starting with pre-job preparation, the first thing I like to go over is communication, building a good line of communication. Project identification, knowing the type of tank and inspection that's going to be required. Information assembly, gathering your static data and historical documents. and equipment and manpower, outfitting each project with the proper tools and personnel to complete the project. Okay, communication. One of the biggest things in this industry, as most of you know, is building relationships. Having a good line of communication, streamlining a good line of communication with your client or your customer during these projects is vital. If you run into a problem midway through a project, it's really important that you're constantly keeping your client up to date with something that might have gone wrong or something that might be going well. They really want to be on your tail as much as possible because they want to get these tanks back into service as soon as they can. Knowing who your primary contact is, and also if there's any safety concerns, maybe there's some obstructions that you need to know about, and how fast do they want to get this job done. Obviously, you want to do these projects with good quality, but you do want to manage your expectations at the end of the day. Project identification. Obviously, you need to know what type of tank you're going to be inspecting, whether it's a vertical, horizontal tank, whether it's elevated or underground. These are really important features that you really have to acknowledge, especially when building your scope of work. The type of tank also changes the components that you will be looking at and evaluating during your inspection. Inspection type, same thing. Knowing whether it's an internal out-of-service inspection or external in-service inspection. This changes obviously due to your interval of inspection, and this is something that the client will communicate with you before the job commences. Now, again, knowing whether it's an internal or external inspection is going to change which components you are inspecting. Obviously, you're going to want to look at as many things as you can while you're doing these inspections, but you will have limitations even on an out of service inspection. There's always going to be limitations. There's always going to be things that you can't inspect or evaluate. So having a good mindset on that is really important going forward. Information assembly. Now, knowing, again, this goes along with communicating with your client. You really want to get as much information on these units as you can before you jump into them or before you start your project. Gathering as many historical documents, drawings, and previous inspection reports. These are going to help you build your report at the end. It will also help you know if there's anything that you should keep an eye on while you're doing the inspection. Maybe there's something, a recommendation from a previous report where you need to monitor a certain area for deterioration. Again, things you have to be aware of before the inspection. And it's also important while you're communicating this with your client to establish if he or she may know if there are any pre-existing problems. They're going to help you, and they're going to, having that good line of communication is really going to help you solve a lot of problems preemptively during your inspection. Equipment and tools, right? Making sure you have the right tools. Obviously, it's going to change based on what you're doing in your inspection. I like to overpack. I tend to like to overpack my units with as many tools and consumables as I possibly can to, in case of a fire, as the expression goes. In case something goes wrong, I want to make sure that I have everything. I've given a list of some of my most common tools that I would pack my truck up with before I heading out on a job. But again, it will change and vary based on your inspection type and your location. Obviously, if you're flying, you can't bring a lot of these things with you. And so making sure that you have a good understanding of what you cannot bring is important. Whether it's going to all fit into your vehicle also plays a big factor. The next thing we're going to talk about is manpower, team building. To me, this is one of the most important aspects of an inspection. Having the right people, surrounding yourself with the right people is always an important task when it comes to any business, when it comes to any team. I like to make sure that obviously you need to make sure that they're experienced, they're qualified, certified, and well trained. just because you may be qualified for something also doesn't mean that you are certified. There's a big distinction between those two things. Um, you are going to be required to do certain inspections and certain tests that you will have to be certified for and qualified for. So making sure that your team is built upon those layout and those bricks will make it easier at the end of the day for you. Obviously, the experience is really important and well trained. And honestly, at the end of the day, just making sure you have the right people surrounding you always makes the difference. Now, building your scope of work. For this case, we're going to talk about building a scope of work for an internal out of service inspection, which is, again, entering the tank and doing a full inspection on every component. Component identification, identifying the components of the tank requiring inspection, right? This is knowing exactly the major components that you're going to be looking at. Each component will have different types of evaluations that will need to be performed for each one. The bottom and the floor, the shell, the appurtenances or manways and nodules, any attachments of to the tank, the roof, containment, and then miscellaneous. And I like to always include miscellaneous in there as a caveat in case something else comes up. And this could include specializing in the coating of the tank or maybe the cathodic protection, um, the access ways, the stairs. And honestly, these days, people are paying much closer attention to safety measures than they have been in previous years, which is great. So paying close attention to access ways, stairs, platforms, stuff like that is going to be important moving forward. You always want to be looking close at these things. And if you do find something, it tends to be a positive and you end up saving the day for a lot of people. If someone were to come along on your job and not only get hurt or just notice a corroded stairway, it could cause issues for yourself and for your company. So I like to put a little emphasis on those areas when I'm doing my inspections. Um, Building a level of priority, right? I like to make sure that I know which items and components are the most important when I'm going into them. The reason I do this is because I like to make sure that I'm starting my projects with the thing that I think is going to be the most important or is going to have the most notable flaws. The reason I do this is because this allows me to stay in constant communication with my client. And if they need to start getting a repair plan uh, together, then they're going to be able to do that quicker rather than later. And honestly, like I said again, it's all about getting that tank back into service for them as soon as possible. Time is money. Procedures. Now this is again, we're breaking down the procedures for each component, assigning the appropriate tasks, right? Uh, every single component has a different type of procedure. And one of the biggest issues that I have found in this industry is that inspectors often, even though they may have the certification, they often don't have the experience. And so knowing what type of evaluations they need to perform is obviously very important. Um, I always say that you can teach anybody how to do anything. It's a matter of giving them a list. It's putting a checklist together. For the bottom and floor, for example, I like to make sure that you're doing a good visual inspection of all the plates, the welds, etc. Really, really taking a good look. The bottom and the floor tends to be the area where you're going to see the most areas of deficiencies, the most deterioration. This is just a common thing. Uh, Going to the shell, right? Visual examination of the shell, same thing. Those lower sections of the shell are going to be really important to focus on. And also, if this tank is in a certain product, knowing which product the tank is in is also really important. So if this tank is experiencing product with a lower specific gravity like gas, you're going to often see um, corrosion in the vapor space, which will be up on the upper section of the shell, right? So it's important, or the underside of the roof. So it's important to kind of know your information before moving forward. And I'll get more into that as we get going here. So again, this is a good breakdown of the basics to your procedures. Knowing exactly what you need to have for qualifications and certifications for each one is important. And I like to have this list out with me while I'm doing this inspection. Now, it is important to note that sometimes when developing a scope, your client or your customer contact may already have a scope that they want you to follow. This is a, I'd say 20% of the time this is pretty common, but most of the time they want you to develop the scope of work yourself. So knowing exactly what your components are and what types of inspections are required for each component is valuable. And again, there's plenty of people out there who have been doing this kind of stuff who will know. So there's endless resources when it comes to the type of inspections that need to be performed. Moving on. Now, obviously, here we're talking about the actual field work, project execution, collecting the appropriate data. The more, the merrier, right? The more data you can collect, obviously, the more ground you're going to cover, the more you're going to make sure that you have at the end of the day. Capturing as much information as possible on the current condition of each component by the use of all these previously mentioned test procedures. Really, you want to just make sure, again, you're covering as much as you can, collecting that data, and then putting into a report format. This will help your client. It will help future inspections. It will help really anybody who's going to be looking at that information in the long run. Discoveries, right? This is where we're talking about our notable areas of concern, things that pop up during these inspections. This tends to be one of the most important things, obviously. You're out there looking and analyzing all your areas of concern, all your possible areas of corrosion, mechanical failure, so on and so forth. Documentation, recording and documenting all the data and findings, right? We're talking about pictures, drawings, etc. Submittals, okay? Now we're getting into repairs and recommendations, detailing areas requiring repair, remediation, or monitoring, as well as providing the appropriate corrective action for each, right? This is usually the most important section of doing an inspection. Knowing what type of recommendations you need to present to your client and what kind of repairs they're going to each recommendation will require. Sometimes it's going to be monitoring a certain area over a long period of time, but again, having a good grasp on your recommendations and what is important for them uh, to repair is important. Again, I like to break everything down into a priority level. I like to say whether or not it needs to be repaired now, it can be monitored over a period of time, or it's not an area of concern. Again, noting everything is still important. I like to make sure that we're in the business of covering our behinds. We need to make sure that we're looking at every single thing and we're recording everything. It's the old adage about even if you verbally tell your client that you have seen something, you always want to make sure that you follow up with an email or something written. I like to put it in my report later on to say, here are my recommendations. These are considerations that I have brought to the attention to my client. Again, it's all about making sure that you're covering all your bases at the end of the day. Reporting. Honestly, the reporting side ends up being the most tedious and sometimes even the most important. Producing a legible and detailed account of the entire inspection process, findings, calculations, recommendations, etc. Here you are just recording everything. Again, building a good report will bring you a long ways and will cover a lot of information that you really want to detail throughout your inspection. I like to make sure that I'm taking as many pictures as I can and doing really detailed drawings and making sure that not only is my report uh, informational but also easy to read. You never know who's going to be reading it, and everyone has their own ability to understand and comprehend information. So I try to make it as easy as I can and try to really break it down the best way that I see fit. All right, we're moving on to enhancing mechanical integrity and precision, right? This is where I'm going to talk about some tips and tools um, to performing a good solid inspection. For me, obviously, I like to break it down into tools, tips and techniques, and education. When we're talking about specialty tools, um, you can kind of go in multiple ways. Knowing which type of tools to use while you're doing your inspection is kind of up for grabs. I like to obviously getting the more advanced technology out there and is great and can be very valuable, but also making sure that you have a good grasp on the basic equipment is important too. And obviously, we're all trying to get our hands on the newest and best. And so, using a phase array unit, honestly, this has been a new thing for me in the last few years. Um, I found that you can find flaws on a tank bottom faster and more accurate with straight beam inspections. Phase array units are typically only used for angle beam weld inspections, but um, I took a class on how to do flaw detection with straight beam with phased array, and it's changed my world as far as looking for flaws on a tank bottom, tank shell, whatever it may be. Um, I've been able to find areas of concern that I never thought I would be able to find before, and everything is so much faster now, and it's honestly it's changed the game for me. So I couldn't suggest it more to any of you new inspectors or current inspectors out there. uh, get a flaw detection straight beam inspection certification. It's totally worth it. Magnetic flux leakage scanning. Obviously, this is a for anyone who has done inspections in the past. This is not a new technology, but the technology does improve over time and can be great, a great tool. If you don't use it, you obviously are way out of the loop. So definitely get on it. And again, there's new technology coming out for MFL testing on a regular basis. Now, another thing I just started doing recently, especially for water tanks, was drone inspections, air and submersible drones. These are great. Um, you're still limited no matter how you see it. For me, I like to always have my hands on a piece of steel in order to inspect it. But if you can do an inspection that's visual by sending a little submersible drone in, then great. And if it's acceptable, then fantastic. Again, I still am more privy to doing an inspection when I'm hands-on, but uh, again, new tools, new opportunities. It's great to keep going in a forward direction. Probably going to take all of our jobs one day. Hopefully not. Um, Tips and techniques. Again, I'm going to go through some tips and techniques for you. Doing mapping, which is just rollout drawings, super important during your inspections. I like to do them no matter what, even if they're useless, even if there's nothing that I'm not providing myself with anything. Honestly, I'm just sketching out what I'm seeing and making sure that I'm uh, covering everything. And when you're asked to do repair plans at the end of a project, and it's super helpful to a welder or a welding crew if they need to go find something and you've mapped it out completely. Very beneficial. And again, just being able to have that in your own notes and your reports can be just a super valuable tool. Um, Data collection. Um, yeah, sorry, data collection. Yeah, and this is in regards to um, Technical Toolbox itself, being able to collect your data while you're in the field. Again, I like to put it all on paper. Technical Toolbox is now finding a way to enhance that experience. They've built a program now where you can put your information while you're in the field into a collection tool and upload that into their program. This will help you do calculations and really help you with your reporting at the end of the day. Um, Obviously, non-destructing getting your NDT skills up. This is huge. I know that for me, when I started actually doing managing projects myself, having that NDT background was super beneficial to me. Having been in the trenches, doing every aspect of these inspections really enhanced my skills, and I'm very, very thankful for it to this day. Uh, you're also willing to do a lot of things that you normally wouldn't be willing to do, so I always enjoy that. Yeah, moving on. And more tips and techniques here. Engineering controls, right? This is I use this as a way to really set yourself up for success. Um, Recommending protective coatings. For me, over the years, I have dealt with so many units that companies are deciding that they don't want to spend the money to put protective coatings inside of their tanks. To me, it's like the best insurance policy. Uh, you're at the end of the day, you would be stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies if you're not putting these protective coatings in. Some products it's not necessary for, because those products aren't tend to not be corrosive, but most products, especially in the oil and gas industry, are very corrosive and bad for steel. And you will be amazed of how quickly steel will start to deteriorate in a small period of time. Um, on many occasions, I have seen a brand new tank floor be installed and then 10 years later, a and they decide not to put a protective coating, an epoxy coating on the inside. 10 years later, they open up that tank and it is riddled with flaws. Doesn't take much. So I'm always telling people to recommend putting coating tank bottoms, coating the inside, do as much coating as they can, always keeping up with it. Even if it is coated in the first place, just make sure you keep up with it. Super, super beneficial. Preventative measures. Again, we're kind of in the era of tanks being in service for long periods of time. Multiple times now, I will see tanks that are um, really at the end of their life. And over the years, especially in the last maybe 30 years or 40 years, they haven't really been able to keep up with everyone's trying to find ways of not spending money, which is understandable. So doing the right measures, putting the money in when they're required to do proper repairs, you're just not going to see. You're going to be most of the time doing damage control, and hey, that's the name of the game. So trying to come up with not only ways of protecting that or fixing the problem that exists, find ways of preventing those problems from ever existing again. I always like to look at it as a challenge to solve the problem going forward. How can we not only remediate this issue, but how can we make it never happen again? So always try to be a forward thinking, say 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now, how is this tank going to look exactly the way it's going to look today? That's the way I like to look at it when I'm doing my inspections. Cathodic protection. It's becoming more and more popular as time goes on. There are still a lot of variables that come into play when it comes to cathodic protection. It's not a perfect science. People will tell you that it is, but it still needs work. And at the end of the day, it still is a useful tool when it's working. So again, if you have a tank that has cathodic protection and a internal coating, in all reality and in a perfect world, that bad boy should be good forever. So really important measures to kind of be aware of when you're doing these inspections.
Hey, Corey, this is
Yeah.
great stuff. We're getting some really great questions from the attendees. I just want to give you a time check that we're just over the halfway mark here. So in the next 5 to 10 minutes, be great if we could show the demo and get to the Q&A just because we have so many coming in here. Attendees, please continue to submit your questions in the right-hand panel of the webinar screen, and we'll try to cover as many as we can at the end.
Sounds good. All right, so I'll quickly go through a lot of these slides. I've covered the meat of the bone, to say the least, at this point. Obviously, being educated on certain things is important going forward. As an engineer, as an inspector, as a technician, really being aware of your environment and the different types of things that come into play when you are doing an inspection is important. Having a good grasp on corrosion, just the science of corrosion, mechanical integrity and structural integrity, super important. Certain things will affect specific areas on a tank. Having a good grasp on what the environment will do to your tank, very important. Brittle fractures, heat stress, things like this, water ingress. These are all really important factors. Data management. Here, technical toolbox applications. Okay, so this is where I'm going to explain to you guys how I use technical toolbox to enhance my projects, right? I use it for calculations. It speeds up the process of data and analysis with easy to use engineering modules. Produces up to date and accurate data. When you're putting in your calculations, you really want to make sure you have good and accurate information. And things change. The industry changes as time goes on, and there are a lot of updates. And the great thing about Technical Toolbox is that they have a full-time staff that handles all this for you. So it is important to note that throughout all these years, I have been using Technical Toolbox. I'm what they would call a power user, and it's been very beneficial to not only my inspection career, but also to my mechanical integrity knowledge. Being aware of, again, any updates that are happening is super important. It also will help with quality control, supplies the user with reliable information for critical decisions and long-term quality control. Super, super great, right? Having good quality, obviously, at the end of the day, is what we're in the game for. And then report enhancement. They refining your reporting and your documentation with comprehensive, informative data. I use this program to not only give me my information, but to help me build my reports and to help me build aesthetically good-looking reports. They do a great job in giving me the data that I need to present to my client or customer. So with that being said, I'm going to access technical toolbox here, and hopefully you guys can all see this. This is their program. This is their hub. I like to use their modules in their hub here to access different types of calculations during my reporting process. Obviously, having a lot of this information is not only important for the report, but it's also important for when you're in the field. So being able to do this while connected to the web is super important. Obviously, it's not always that easy, and you're not always in an area with good reception. But again, being able to access it pretty freely is super, super beneficial. And again, it's all up to date, and you can and reliable, and you can really count on it. So I like to always to use this program for really building my certain inspections. If I'm doing a type of inspection and I need to put a report together for, say, a certain client, and I say my tank is 120 foot in diameter, and really the biggest part of this this module here in the inspection area here is to have a good grasp on your minimum values for your shell, this specifically on the shell, your tank shell minimum thickness calculations. Obviously, knowing what your minimum values are is super important, and it also gives you remaining life in year for that inspection. So if something were to come up, super, super, super valuable to have. And Again, if you can access it while you're on the job itself, even better. So say our tank is 30 feet in height and our specific gravity. And again, having a nice list of what your specific gravities, super helpful. And this is a very large list. We don't always know when we're out there, and sometimes the client doesn't even know what their specific gravity of their product is. So very nice to have. We'll put in number 2 fuel oil right now. And then again, here we're going into the joint efficiency. These are all things that you will learn or have learned in your API 653 class exam, so on and so forth. But it does change over time, and being able to know and not have to recall it and go back into the code book to go look to see what your joint efficiency is, super helpful. So say we'll just do one for now. The age of the tank, we'll say 20 years. Okay. And again, here's another good area of where the information is updated and really great to use. Being able to know what type of material. Again, this changes your stress values. So not having to go and dig around to see what these stress values are, super helpful, and will also be able to make life a lot easier for you. This is where you put in your shell course height here. We'll just say 6 feet. 6 feet. And again, this will all change as you go along here. And then when you come over to this section here and it says your T previous, this is your usually your nominal thickness. So for the sake of this, we'll say 3125. And you'll say your actual, we can say your actual was you found areas that were 299 thousandths. Okay. And again, you're going to get your corrosion rate. You're going to get your remaining life in years. Your minimum value, obviously my minimum value was way higher. So if I did 500 thousandths and did maybe 450, again, now we're into the acceptable range. Once you're all done with this, you can actually print them out into a Word document or into a PDF where it presents it in a really nice way. So again, I could go through the entire toolbox with you, but it varies. And there's a lot of great tools in here that are really helpful. And I use every single day. So moving back to the PowerPoint here. That was the live demo. Okay, so some of my challenges and case studies. Okay, so here are some real life challenges that I've faced in the industry. Just things that I've come across and obstacles that I've come across that you're probably going to have happened to you at some point or have happened to you at some point, and this is how I dealt with them. We're talking about failed mechanisms like cathodic protection, non-preventative measures, non-coated tanks, stuff we already discussed, failed protection. This is a insulation damage and environmental damage. And this was an event from certain animals having an effect on a roof, the roof of a tank. So we'll start with the cathodic protection. Each one of these is a different project that I've experienced. The first one here was an old and failed sacrificial anode causing isolated corrosion. You don't see many of these anymore. This is the type of sacrificial anode that you're going to see on the side of a ship. And like on the side of a ship, you're supposed to replace these essentially once a year. They like to replace, most ships like to replace these sacrificial anodes pretty frequently because eventually they do start to cause corrosion on the area around it. So a very strange circumstance. I doubt many of you guys will ever see this. Not a very good practice. This was drilled right into the top of the floor. Again, terrible practice. Don't know who came up with that, but I immediately had these removed, had to replace plates, and excuse me, and so on and so forth. So the next one we're moving on to here is poorly installed cathodic protection needing complete replacement. This was a tank bottom that had failed out and started leaking before the tank really was in service for maybe 5 or 6 years. Complete failure of the installation of the cathodic protection. The entire bottom was replaced, and obviously this caused a lot of problems. And they had to replace the entire cathodic protection system. The next one, moving on, is another failed cathodic protection causing large areas of corrosion. This was a case of small areas not being installed correctly. Again, another case, at least these were isolated in this case, but they were still large areas. I was told and was informed at this point in time that your sacrificial anodes in these cases, whether it's magnesium or another type of sacrificial anode, needs to be touching that steel at all times. Now, with these large tanks, these tank floors do flex, so it is important to keep this in mind when you are experiencing some corrosion. I like to make sure that often, if you see areas where you're getting indications of corrosion, these could be areas where the anode on the floor is not underneath the floor is not touching the steel. So good thing to keep in mind. These cause pockets of corrosion and will really quickly affect the condition of these floors. Like I said before, tank floors tend to be our biggest problem. You're going to see the most issues you do. It's been an ongoing battle over the years to make sure that you're trying to find the right solution to the keeping these tank floors alive for as long as you can. And obviously, with the quality steel going down, this doesn't help your situation either. So this was the next case on here is another case of inactive cathodic protection. This is even an inspection of, I did an inspection on a tank where I found a significant amount of corrosion that with a tank that was said to have cathodic protection. In this case, the cathodic protection wasn't working and was in turn having a negative effect on the steel itself. And not only was it affecting this tank, but it was also affecting the tank that was adjacent to it. It was like a negative charge. So very bad situation there. Again, just things that you're going to come up with that you need to know about. Tanks with no internal protective coating. Again, I spoke about this before. Having tanks with no protective coating is essentially you're asking for trouble, no matter what way you swing it. Even in tanks that say that the product is said to not have corrosive effects, you're still asking for trouble. I like to make sure that I always suggest my protective an epoxy coating on the inside of these tanks. It's just going to cover your butt, and again, it's good insurance at the end of the day to make sure that nothing happens. Water tanks with failed protective coating. With most towns, unfortunately, you're going to see, especially a lot of states, the regulations for proper procedure and proper inspection intervals for water tanks is very infrequent. So although this doesn't necessarily fall under API 653, it is possible that you're going to run into water tanks, and water itself is the most corrosive element that you can have. So if these units are now just being opened up and they've never been inspected over a certain amount of time, you're going to see some severe corrosion, whether whether the tank had been coated or not. In this case right here, the entire internal of the tank was in really poor condition and needed to be replaced. So that was fun. Another case study, insulation damage. Old insulation is gonna cause pockets of corrosion. It's inevitable. In this photo in particular, they had to remove the entire insulation jacket, and because they were finding holes on the inside of the tank that were caused by external water pockets. Super bad. that was quite the construction that we had to take over. And again, it was due to poor maintenance on the insulation jacket. Just was a lot of damage. It was sitting on the ocean, so obviously the water is going to get into it, and it's salt water, and now we're talking about a totally different type of corrosion. And again, just ate through this tank shell, and we eventually had to do a lot of repairs and replacements on this shell. Moving on. This is a photo of a column that was bent. Now, this specific case was due to a tank that not only was storing water in the winter without any insulation, so there was this water was freezing inside of the tank, but it was also sitting on the ground where this area would constantly flood. So there was a lot of movement of the tank beneath it. So when for whatever reason, after many years of this tank being holding water, as soon as we opened it, the entire column had shifted significantly, frozen, and broken a lot of not only the column in the tank, but any internal piping as well, very severely damaged. So the lesson learned there was really making sure that if you're going to store water, you know the appropriate measures to doing it, making sure that tank is not going to move. Again, it's hard to predict everything that's going to happen, but to try and be proactive as much as you can and use engineering controls and really be smart, very important when you're doing these inspections. This was a photo, again, and how I mentioned before, this is from seagull damage. Seagull feces caused this. And in many places that exist near bodies of water and trash plants, birds will drop onto the tank roofs. And this is why they tell you when a seagull gets anything on your windshield or your vehicle to wipe it off immediately. This is the reason why. This is what it starts to look like after a long period of time. Really has an acidic effect on steel. Nasty, and doesn't get any better. So again, kind of a unique situation, making sure it was coated, they ended up putting owls or fake owls up on top of the tank and such to prevent it from happening ever again. Who knows if it worked. Deterioration of the floor projection plate. I like to use the floor projection plate, which is the bottom of the tank that sticks out from the externally on the tank. I like to use this as a measure to determine if there's any water getting underneath the tank, and if I'm going to see any corrosion. If I'm doing my inspection, again, on the inside, you want to be able to focus on areas of concern. If you start seeing corrosion on a floor projection plate, as seen in this picture, there's a good chance that water is getting underneath that tank floor and doing some pretty nasty damage. So again, it's an area that you can use to help another spot in the tank. Being able to notice things like this, very important. One of the things that my grandfather always used to talk about with the industry was I asked him one day, I said, what makes you love this industry so much? And he told me, he said, the reason he likes doing it is because he gets to play detective every day. He gets to go out there and almost like a Sherlock Holmes and solve problems and come up with solutions and really track down evidence and stuff like that. As a young kid, hearing that, it's like the coolest thing in the world, and it makes you want to do this inspection, to do this job forever. And obviously it worked. He convinced me. So I use that as my playing my game plan whenever I'm doing these inspections. I look at them to see if I notice any patterns or any types of advantages that will help me perform my inspection better. So we're going to get into the API inspection data collection tool. I'm going to turn this over to PK and Kesley and let you guys get into this. This is a new tool for their technical toolbox and a great new tool. So I'll let them get into this and explain it.
All right. Thanks, Corey. Yeah, so Technical Toolboxes developed this tool. It is currently under development, so very soon it will be out. This helps in getting the data captured while you are in the field. So you can measure your recordings, take the thickness measurement readings, and all other measurements related to your tank, and then you would add it here in this application while you are on site. That way you don't have to enter it on paper or anything. You can just directly enter it here, and then later on when you are connected to the internet, you would be able to push that data into our software. That way there is no re-entry of the same data into a different application, and then you would be able to update that as well later on when you go back to the field and you want to update that data. That can again be updated, and it will go directly into the program. So it is time saving activity. We are not doing basically we are not trying to re-enter the data again and again. It's just one time activity, and then use it freely. Now this can be used on your laptops or on your tablets as well, so that capability would be there, so you would be able to enter that data. And yeah, in a short, I mean, this is what it is all about.
Thank you. Thank you, PK and Corey. Awesome presentation. Thanks for covering that data collection tool. So we have a few poll questions that lend to what PK just explained here. We're always looking for ways at technical toolboxes to help us gauge your interest and improve our products. Here's the first poll question I'll leave up for about a minute. We're looking to see if anyone has interest in the API toolbox in this case, but also our data collection tool we're developing. So these help guide us in our next steps forward. While we wait for this question and the next one to appear, I'm going to go ahead and dig into the Q&A while we have some time here. One of the great questions we got from Kevin, and I believe this is directed towards you, Corey, is in my limited experience, I've found that a poorly applied coating is worse than no coating at all. What are some tips you could give to ensure that coatings are applied properly?
Yeah, this is a great question, Kevin. It's tough. Making sure that the tank bottom is, or the surface area is as clean as possible makes all the difference in the world. It also your environment, the environment of of where it's being coated. Again, sandblasting is almost it's a necessary tool for doing putting that coating down. I couldn't suggest it more. It's also important. What I like to make sure to do, and this kind of falls into the same category, Kevin, is that I like to after they do the sandblasting, I also like to do my own walk down once the sand is removed before that coating is put on there. Not only to make sure that the surface preparation is well done, but also to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Sandblasting will often find things that will open up things that you don't normally see. It also can it will also give you the opportunity to really make sure that you've covered everything during that process. So if you're going to get the opportunity to ever get in there after a sandblast, go for it. It will change your entire perspective on everything. And again, making sure that surface is prepared properly before installing a coating makes all the difference in the world.
Awesome, thank you. This is the last poll question here, but we'll keep going through the Q&A until we run out of time here. Corey, does Technical Toolboxes calculate LTAs?
Yes, it certainly does. I guess you'd have to be more specific on that in that genre, but yes, it definitely does.
Okay, great. I think this one's more for PK. Can we use metric units or a combination of units in the tool itself?
Yes, there is the capability. You would be able to use different units, including metric as well, or you would be able to create your own units, mix and match, that is developed across the platform. So yes, metric units and other units can be created and used. Yes.
Thank you, PK. We got a great compliment. Thanks for the presentation. Well packaged and delivered. Thank you for attending. In your opinion, what is an average time for reassessment, Corey?
That's a great question. What is an average time for a general assessment or reassessment, did you say?
It says reassessment.
I guess I'd have to know more specifically what the question is.
Okay.
To do a general inspection, again, it's all based on how many people you have involved in the inspection. Sometimes if you can man your jobs up to have a bunch of people involved, and sometimes it's beneficial to just have 2 people or 1 person out there doing the inspections. Depends on the size of the tank, so those things can vary. Yeah, again, it's being exact as far as timing is concerned is always up in the air and can be very, very hard to track down. To be able to know, again, without experience and knowing the type of inspection you're doing, super important to determine how long it's going to take you to do these inspections.
Awesome. A couple more here. We have a couple minutes. We have a lot of new technicians joining us. Does Technical Toolboxes have any programs helping us get these young folks up to speed? I think that's more for you, Corey.
Okay, yeah. I would say even just knowing the program itself. If you're a new technician and you're trying to learn how to do an appropriate inspection, or even how to develop your skills during these inspections, knowing your calculations changes the game for you. It will help develop you as an inspector in so many ways. In this program, in Technical Toolbox, they just being able to learn those types of calculations will help you in the field as well. It will explain things better to you on what you need to collect for data. And there's also great techniques within Technical Toolbox to they often will reference the code book and where you can find something. Now, I know that Technical Toolbox is constantly evolving, and after speaking with the development department myself, I know that they have many plans for the future on really helping new technicians become better. And again, having good resources at the end of the day makes all the difference. I'm always someone that anybody can call to get going. A better part of my career was spent with on different job sites, just teaching people how to do a proper inspection, and I absolutely love doing that. So always a good thing to keep in mind.
Thank you, Corey. And I'd also like to add, we also have a training department here at Technical Toolboxes. We have live virtual classes that you can do in small groups or online by registering. And we also have self-paced courses that you can do in your own time. I know Corey is actually recording some specific to API right now that we should have up and running very soon. I know we have more questions that came in, but unfortunately we have to wrap. So we will follow up via email to the rest of these questions that we couldn't address today. But I want to thank you all for your questions and for attending. Thank you both to Corey and PK for the presentation and to everyone in attendance. You'll receive a copy of this recording via email in the next 2 days. And if you have any additional questions or interests, please feel free to reach out to us at Technical Toolboxes. Thank you and have a great day.